I would like to hear from Phil, who goes by he, him in Texas. And Phil, if you're listening, you're on with Jimmy and Tom. How can we help you?
Hi, Tom. Hi, Jimmy. I trust you gentlemen are both well.
I'm feeling pretty darn good. Tom is my first time hosting with him. He's got some good energy. He's making me feel all the love in the room. And yeah, man, just ready to have a great call. What's up, Phil?
Cool. Well, this will be a short call. First, I have to say I should have entered last week because I think creation won't be complete until we get a ketchup packet we don't have to open with our teeth.
Ooh, yeah. I mean, we're putting things in outer space. That's right. Yeah, we're putting things in outer space, and we're still squirting ourselves with ketchup. So that's a good point.
Right, exactly. Well, when I was in college, I took a wonderful course called Church-State Relationship in America, and it was all about Supreme Court decisions that addressed the church-state issues. And a wonderful teacher, a national authority, and although he was an ordained disciples minister, he was a strict separationist when it came to church and state. So in 1984, the case was Lynch v. Donnelly, and a creche scene, a nativity scene, had been put up. It was put up in a private park. It wasn't like it was on the courthouse lawn. It was put up in a private park, but they used taxpayer dollars to do it, and of course got sued. So I think this was the Warren Burger Court, and in 1984, this decision came down. And they said, you can do a nativity scene as long as you make it part of the larger cultural symbology of Christmas. So there has to be a Santa and Frosty and Elves and Reindeer and so on. And interestingly, it was the first time the words creche and nativity scene were addressed. Those words were used in a Supreme Court case. So it was a split decision. It was 5-4. And they said, you can do that as long as you are inclusive of the other imagery that is important to Christmas. And there were several cases since then, but that was the one that came to be known as the plastic reindeer rule.
Well, yeah, I mean, I don't necessarily agree with that. I don't know what your thoughts are on that, Phil. I mean, what do you think that putting a kind of image of Christian folklore, one that leads to, the belief in a god or deity, do you think that is, something that is applicable to all folks, even if we start including all these other things? I mean, I feel personally, if somebody said to me, I don't know, you can keep your Poseidon statue here if you put up pictures of, Odin and Jesus and all that other stuff, it wouldn't make me feel any better about my belief. In fact, I'd feel like I was being a little bit infringed on. I don't know. What are your thoughts there?
Well, I could have gone either way on that. And as I say, it was a 5-4 decision. So 4 of the justices were absolutely against the whole thing, the whole idea of the creche thing. The image, the nativity scene image, is part of the cultural tradition. It's not exclusively Christian. It's just something that's associated with Christmas. So I could have gone either way on that one.
What was the pattern of like determining what is part of the cultural tradition? Do you know?
It's been 40 years since I read the opinions on that case. My understanding is they just said it had to include other Christmas imagery, so it wasn't exclusively religious.
Well,
I don't know. I don't know. I do know. I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, please.
I have heard, and I just found out about this today, I have heard that Greg Abbott is fighting a court case right now regarding this. And at lower court, he has lost, but I'm sure he'll pursue it. And I don't know the facts of that case, so I shouldn't even go into it, but I'm definitely going to look into that. So I just thought that was an interesting piece of Christmas trivia. Important case, kind of interesting, and I particularly like the idea that it came to be called the plastic reindeer rule. I just think that's hysterical.
I kind of understand how. Oh, sorry, Phil. For the folks at home, why the plastic reindeer rule? Is it because does a reindeer pass the test or not? Because it was a nativity scene, right?
Yeah, that's the whole idea. As long as there are other Christmassy images up there, can be considered part of the umbrella of the cultural notions of Christmas.
Yeah. But I guess how do you stop? Where do you stop? Right? What's the end of all these things? Because I've got my Festivus, whatever. I'm not as dialed in on that as I should be, but I'm sure there's traditions in there. Can we allow that? I think that the interesting thing I think from the whole story is like, if you're a fan of the establishment clause, generally I'm with you, but what do we call people who, Jimmy, you're probably better at this. What do we call people who view the Constitution as like whatever it meant at the moment that it was written by the literal language it was used? What do you call that?
Constructionalist. A strict constructionalist.
Yeah. Right. If we're going to be that way, that's fine, as long as we're consistent. And it seems like there's a lot of God inserting himself as we get past World War II versus how things started with the Establishment Clause. You would think that if there was intended to be more nativity scenes and more Christ in schools and like all that, we would have heard about it a few hundred years ago versus a little bit more recently, right?
A lot of these Supreme Court cases are tricky. They're fascinating, but they can be very, very problematic because it's always a question of where do you draw the line? Where's the line between endorsement and repression? And sometimes that's a very difficult line to draw.
Where do you draw it?
Who, me?
Yeah.
I'm like my professor. I'm a pretty strict separationist. You know, but okay. Here's another quick case. There was public money being given to students for bus fare to get to school. Now, what about kids who go to religious schools? Does giving them bus fare, which is kind of non-religious, does giving them bus fare count as endorsement of religion? And I don't remember how that one came out, but a lot of these cases are like, what do we do here? How do we solve this?
I mean, I'm no lawyer, but it sounds like a distinction between a public policy and a private policy, and public funds are not delegated out or delegated out to private institutions. I mean, if a private institution wants to bus their children in, I think it's up to them to be able to do that and not rely on public funding. That's just my bare bones knowledge of the distinction between the public and the private sector. The schools have to be consistent across the board with their students, regardless of race or gender or religion. But from what I understand, private schools don't necessarily fall within those same confines. I mean, if they're a Catholic school, then they can do Catholic things. And if you go to that school, well, that's part of the agreement. You've signed up. And so you're going to do Catholic things with them. But, they can't come into the public sector and say, hey, time for Catholic things. And so goes the debate. So that's how we end up with these cases where we are trying to tell people, look, you can't put the 10 Commandments in a public building. You can't put a manger, a Jesus scene in a public area. And so that is not the only case, the one that you mentioned. I read a case this morning, and it's a little bit of an older case, and I don't remember the specifics, but basically the ruling on that was because the manger scene is cultural and not religious, it can stay. They didn't have to add reindeer or elves. And I was pretty shocked because I would say that a manger scene of Jesus is absolutely not cultural and applicable across a variety of worldviews, philosophies, religions, etc. It is strictly confined to Christianity. And so,
what do you say, Jimmy, to like those folks who would say it's intertwined with the culture, the Christian Judeo principles, right? You don't like to murder people, not because of some belief system that you have that you've invented on your own, but because you were born in a country that has Christian Judeo principles and values, and that's what we're being consistent on. How would you push back against that?
I mean, I would push back with the fact that I am not Judeo nor Christian, and I am guaranteed rights to not have to practice those things, and so I'm choosing not to practice them. And then I would also kind of state that while what we are versus what we claim to be may be different, right? So we started off as a group of colonies that were certainly Christian, right? But made a document that clearly states we're not going to sponsor religion. I would go with the strict constructionist of that. You know, the strict constructionist in me says, look, we have this document that culturally we are aligned with. While you think that we're aligned culturally through Jesus, I say we're aligned culturally through the Constitution. And it might not be part of a religious culture that binds us, but it's certainly one that's administrative and one that is, governmental and legal. And so that's whether people recognize it or not, a cultural guideline. And so, yeah. Phil, you are a repeat caller, are you not?
Oh, yes.
Yeah. So tell me about what happened last week. You called in, and what was that conversation like?
Oh my God, that is into a can of worms. Well, I'll make it real short. A few months ago, I revisited my church of origin, which is a very liberal, progressive Disciples of Christ church. And a few weeks later, I joined that church because wonderful people, just a great environment. It's community. It's a nexus for doing public good, like distributing food and clothing and so on to people who need it. And it's an opportunity to learn and to teach. And as a former religion major and an atheist, and they know I'm an atheist, I can bring some stuff into the church that they might not hear anyplace else. And oh my God, the hate mail I got in the comments for how dare you, call yourself an atheist and go to church. Well, what business is that of yours? I'm not saying you should go. I'm just saying I'm going and liking it. But certain atheists really took exception to that.
Yeah. That's interesting. Did you come up with that idea of like, hey, I'm just going to go because I'm searching for a community or something like that? Or they're like, hey, come to our church again, come back. It's not all Jesus-y. We just like people. We like helping out the folks who are unhoused.
Well, this is, these are people I went to school with. A couple of my former school teachers go there. I just kind of wanted to see what was going on and if the church had changed any. And we just a few weeks ago got the badge for whatever organization does that of being LGBTQ welcoming and friendly. And in fact, the minister, the pastor, our new pastor, a month or two ago said, if you're a skeptic, an atheist, a secular humanist, come on in. You're fine here. And nobody has tried to recruit me or proselytize me. There have been no arguments. And there's been nothing like that. It's just a bunch of really good people who I enjoy being around.
What kind of what's the sermon like?
What
do they talk about?
We did several weeks in a row. Pastor Russell did positive messages in Disney animated films. So it's pretty secular. It's a pretty secular. There's no hell and brimstone. There's no.
What kind of church is this?
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah. What kind of church is this?
Disciples of Christ.
Okay.
Well, Disciples of Christ is we split off from the Church of Christ a long time ago. We kind of Alexander Campbell and can't remember the other guy's name, and we went liberal and they went conservative. So this is, if you're familiar with Texas Christian University, that's a Disciples University.
Well,
very, very.
Why do you
very liberal? In fact, go ahead.
Please continue, Phil. We have a little bit of a delay, so I keep thinking that you're done, and I start talking, but I'm going to give it to you. You have the mic.
Well, some years ago, 40 years ago, 50 years ago, when I was a teenager, the church split. We had some fundagelicals come in and kind of take over, and it crippled the church for years. And sadly, I was a teenager, and I was on the wrong side of that fight. But I quickly woke up and came to my senses and realized I'm just believing this stuff because somebody told it to me. And I'm a science buff, so I didn't buy the flood or anything like that even back then. But at that point, a Christian minister, I think his name was Waddell, said the disciples are such that if you want to go there and you want to believe Jesus Christ is Son of God, my Savior, that's fine. If you also want to believe Jesus Christ was a cool guy, he's my personal hero, that's fine too.
Well, so I know what it's like to get, I don't want to say eviscerated in the comments, but I am checked by some callers from time to time. And I had an experience of my own not too long ago. But why? And I'll get into that in a little while. But Phil, why do you think that you're getting so much pushback? What is it that people have a problem with you going to church? Because in my opinion, with the trends in church attendance lately, I would say that you should probably be welcome. I would imagine that any clergy member would be happy to have a new member of the congregation, excuse me. And for some followers to kind of push back on the idea that somebody new wants to maybe come in and, I don't know, hear the word, be part of things, donate, is a little bit shocking to me. We are seeing concessions be made kind of across Christian organizations. The Pope in recent months has come out and started maybe professing we could be wrong. We've seen other churches that take a little bit more of a liberal stance also become affiliated with the LGBTQ community, becoming more welcome, even hosting weddings between same-sex couples, which I think is a great thing. That's all that to say, we see the church making changes. I would say that they're making these changes because, well, they need to reach more people. They have to just adapt to the times. And I feel like your purpose, your integration might fit along that line. So why do you think that, people have a problem with that?
It's a symptom of binary thinking. There's every point on the spectrum represented by religious and non-religious belief. There's 1,000 different stories, but people tend to think in binary: all Christians bad, all non-Christians good, and it's simply not that simple.
Yeah. Well, I will tell you. Well, first of all, was it your church members that were angry, or was it just like, did you get that from church? Did you feel welcome, or were they just as angry as some of the people in the comments?
I got this from atheists. The atheists were telling me, "Oh, you're a traitor. You don't know what you're doing. Why would you bother?" Et cetera, et cetera. I thought I explained that pretty well.
We're not very good. We're not very good at that. It's we were talking before the show. It's really difficult to have like a real cohesive unit when you're like, all right, what are our values? We don't believe the one thing. What about everything else? It's like all over the board now. There is no like atheists, and a lot of people look at it as just one religion. And you could look at the angry atheists and say that's how they are. In fact, some of the folks here might know our caller Emmanuel. I've been talking to Emmanuel, and I think Emmanuel probably has a similar view that others do, which is like atheists think this way about this thing. That because I've heard one say that, and we do the same thing. Christians think this way about this thing.
Yeah.
Oh, no, I don't believe in the freaking boat and all that stuff. I believe in the cross and all that stuff. Like, I know that there are so many different on the spectrum of belief. It's all over the place. And that's why shows like this are important and conversations like this are important. Be like, what do you specifically believe about that thing? And how did you get there? And if we can understand that and maybe get some aha moments for ourselves, that's what I'm all after here. We can do it for the listener. That's great too.
Yeah. So Phil, I want
to at this small church, Okay, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Nope. Floor is yours, sir.
At this small church, and this is only typically on a Sunday morning we'll have 100 people, and I go to Sunday school as well, and not one person has given me any grief about my non-theism. In fact, they listen to me because I have valuable information. I was a religion major. So they're respectful. There's been no arguments. There's been no challenging. We're getting along great. And I think it's important, I think it's significant that a skeptic and an atheist is available to them.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's strange too. I mean, because like Jimmy, we were talking about the war on Christmas. You could conceivably put all of the things that you talked about at the beginning as like, oh, it's a war on Christmas. And I see no difference between you reporting historical facts and like just having a conversation about it. Why do we have to do that? That's why I'd call this positive aggressive. Jimmy and I, we're nice, kind, gentle people. With you, Phil, hopefully you feel the same way. But we're also going to be aggressive and ask you why, how, what, where, how are you getting there? Help us understand. And if we can't get it, well, then that's maybe not something that we're going to carry forward as far as our own thinking.
Yeah, Phil, I really appreciate that you were a religion major, because my religion really fell apart when I took as a freshman in college my Bible literature class. I mean, I'd never read the Bible before, and then I read the whole thing front to back, which I should probably do again because it's been about, I don't know, 20 years or so, 17. But just getting in and examining what that is, it kind of made me start really questioning, even though I kind of had some, tendencies to think it doesn't really add up to me. What was that kind of what you experienced? Like, you're a religion major. Did you go into this thing like, I'm going to learn about what it is I believe, and then you started learning and you realized, oh crap, like somebody missed something somewhere, and you had to kind of reattack it. What do you think?
By the time I got into college as a religion major, I didn't start as a religion major. I quickly changed after I took this wonderful professor. I was pretty much halfway out the door at that point. After seeing what the fundamentalist takeover did to my church, and this was before conservative religion had become so political. It's changed dramatically over the last 45 years. But no, I was already mostly a skeptic. And then, of course, I discovered James Randi and Gardner and all those great guys, and Carl Sagan, and I realized a lot of this is bullshit. I need to go ahead and be a skeptic.
Yeah.
But no, I was, and that's the thing. This was a liberal college. So there was no preaching going on in class. This was serious history and study, and we talked about a lot of world religions. It wasn't just Christianity. We talked about Buddhism, Hinduism, and cults and sects, and it was just a really good overview. But no, I was pretty much out the door by the time I was 18. I was already on the way to being an atheist.
Right. And that's what I'm saying. Like, you're out the door, and then you get that little nudge from actually being put in a position where you have to question the things that, you've been told all these years. And it just really helps you along. We always say, the best way to becoming an atheist is to actually read the Bible, or to, in the case for non-Christians, to kind of, maybe read through some of the things that they've been taught all their lives. So anyway, I want to kind of move on to some other callers. Phil, I really appreciate your call, and keep calling in. Glad you called 2 weeks in a row, and great conversation, great experience. And I hope your trip back to church is a worthwhile one.